Hey, it's Kara, your host. I'm here today because I'm often asked, what should I read next? Or what is your all time favorite book? And that is why I created this list. This list isn't a declaration of the greatest books of all time. Rather, it's a collection of the stories I can't stop thinking about, the ones I've recommended more times than I can count, and that continue to live rent-free in my head. Whether you're looking for your next unforgettable read, or just want to see what books have shaped my reading life, I hope this guide of 25 books inspires you to discover a new favorite. Head on over to the link in the show notes or to bookishflights.com/read/25 books. Hi, I'm Kara Infante, and this is Bookish Flights. In each episode, I chat with one bookish guest as we take some time to sample and savor the pairing recommendations from their bookish flight. We hope to give you suggestions to cultivate your TBR list and nurture your leisure time through books. In today's episode, I am chatting with Julie Berry. Julie is the New York Times bestselling author of the 2020 NCTE Walden Award and SCBWI Golden Kite Award winner Lovely War, the 2017 Prince Honor, and LA Times Book Prize shortlisted The Passion of Dulce, the Carnegie and Edgar shortlisted All the Truth That's in Me, the Odyssey Honor The Scandalous Sisterhood of Prickwillow Place, and the Wishes and Wellingtons trilogy. Her picture books include The Night Frolic, Happy Right Now, and Cranky Right Now. Her new YA novel, If Looks Could Kill, released yesterday. Julie holds a BS from Rensselaer in Communication and an MFA from Vermont College. Julie owns Author's Note, an adorable independent bookstore in Medina, New York. Welcome to the show, Julie.
Thank you so much, Kara, for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes, well, this is a very detailed bio about you, but I also feel like we are so much more than our bios. So can you tell us a little bit about you?
Sure. Well, I am the youngest of seven children. So I grew up in a big farming family right here in Western New York, where I now live, which is something I never saw coming in my life. I left Western New York after high school, went to college, got married, lived for my adult life in Boston and in Los Angeles, raised four boys, started writing books. I've published over 30 titles for young people, and that's been an absolute joy. But I just love bookstores. Who doesn't, right? Especially if you're a reader, you love bookstores.
Yep.
And as an author, I toured and visited and did events in bookstores all over the country. And I was very aware of the role that bookstores played in my own career. And so we were living in Los Angeles in 2020 when COVID erupted all over the world. And the bookstore in my little hometown came on the market a couple of months after.
Wow.
And it was my husband and I sort of looked at each other and said, "Oh my goodness, here's a small town, 6 or 7 thousand people. Um, I'm sort of known there as, hometown girl who went on to become an author."
Yeah.
And so we just said, let's go buy it. And so we did. So where some people have their COVID project is, they redid the bathroom, we redid a bookstore. And
Yeah.
so it is now called Author's Note. And my husband actually suggested that name, which I thought was perfect because I am an author, but also my historical YA novels are sort of known for having long, chewy author's notes in them with lots of historical context and sources and things like that. And as I've thought about it, I feel like every book is an author's note to the world, right? It's
Yeah.
it's their love letter to the future. And so it felt like a perfect name, and it is such an adorable little store. I do yoga, and I love to cook, and I love to eat. That's my other problem. So that's kind of Julie Berry in a nutshell, I think.
I love that. I love that. I imagine, as you said, we are all readers and authors are readers. And when we are in this realm, we love bookstores. Was it always a wish of yours to own a bookstore?
I think that kind of evolved slowly.
Okay.
I I don't, I'd always been interested. So here's the funny thing. My father owned a gas station and car wash in this town where I was born and raised. And I always admired the fact that he owned his own business. That was always really cool to me and like important to me. And as a child, he would drive me to school in the morning and then go open the gas station, and I would pepper him with questions about having a business and having a store. Gas station is a store.
Yeah.
And so I think I always had a dream of like a little store of my own. I would play store as a kid. And then, of course, bookstores are just the most magical thing. Uh, even if you don't love reading, you love bookstores, but people who do, are just over the moon. And of course, I've learned that a lot of people have owning a bookstore as a sort of fantasy, right?
Yeah.
I've had people tell me, "Oh my gosh, you write books and you own a bookstore. You're living my dream."
Yeah.
Like I don't think there was ever a really serious to own a bookstore until this bookstore became available. And then it was like, oh boy, everything pointing to the moment, even if I wasn't fully aware of that at the time.
Yeah. It seems a bit like serendipity when you say that, but I imagine the day-to-day reality of owning a bookstore is not this like idyllic thing, right? It's a job, it's work, it's a business. All of that takes a lot of effort and time. So that's, I guess, kind of why I asked that of like, but I love the serendipity nature of like it just became available and then it was like, well, maybe I can finally acknowledge this dream.
Absolutely, absolutely. It is a lot of work. It is a lot of work. If you think about it, every book on the shelves of a bookstore is a decision that somebody
Yeah.
had to make. And those books are constantly changing and flowing and evolving. Like I don't think I realized, 10 to 15 cases of books arrive per day, pretty much.
Wow.
And we're a small store. We are not like a
Yeah.
big city, store, but 15 cases of books arrive per day because that's how many are going out the door per day on average. And so that's a lot of decisions that someone had to make. And if you think about being at a bookstore and trying to decide which book you're going to buy, it's a hard choice. Even if
Yeah.
you kind of indulge and come away with a stack of books, you had to make a bunch of choices and it took a bunch of time. And so our buyer, who's not me, has to make all those choices each day. And it's a lot of work, but so much joy, so much love because, you know, a bookstore draws readers. So it
Yeah.
draws my favorite people to us all the time. And I love that. But yeah, the bookstore is marvelous. It's called Author's Note. You can find us on Instagram. You can find us online. And I always say, if you're in Western New York, please come say hi.
Yeah, I always, whenever we travel, that's my thing is trying to find if there's an indie bookstore in the area so I can go pop my head in. And because, like you said, they're all unique, they all have their own vibe, and they're just these delightful little places. So that's, I love traveling that way. So we're here today, though, to discuss your latest novel, If Looks Could Kill. And if listeners maybe haven't gotten a chance to pick the book up yet, can you tell them a little bit about it?
Absolutely. Well, If Looks Could Kill is a historical novel. It is a thriller. It has a true crime twist and a love story. And at its core, If Looks Could Kill is Medusa versus Jack the Ripper. So we take history, we take true crime, and we take mythology, and we put them all in a Ninja blender. And If Looks Could Kill is what we and that's kind of how I love to write. I love mixing history, like I love the deep, deep research of historical fiction, but I like to kind of add an element of, I guess you'd say, the unknown, right? Whether that's sort of spiritual, like in the case of The Passion of Dulce, where we had a medieval mystic, or in the case of Lovely War, where the Greek gods were the storytellers of two sets of love stories set during World War One, which were,
Yeah.
very solidly grounded in research and real world events. And yet I've got Aphrodite telling you about them. So I had to figure out which monster I was
Yeah.
going to involve myself with. And I read some stuff about different female Greek monsters. And of course, Medusa for me was the most resonant one. And I think that's true for a lot of us. Medusa really stands the test of time. The Hydra is female, but I wasn't really feeling it,
Yeah.
and of course the Sphinx and things like that. So Medusa really called to me. So I started exploring all that and writing all this stuff about the original Medusa. And I thought it was great. I really loved it. But I also don't think I'd found my way yet into the real novel. And I shared it with my editor, and she's like, "I love how you're exploring this. Keep going." I'm like, "Oh, shoot." So I talked to a writer friend of mine, Nancy Werlin, award-winning YA author, and she said, "What if you put Medusa in Victorian times? What if you got out of antiquity and brought her into something a little more modern, lowercase m modern?"
Yeah.
And I thought, that could be fun. The Victorian era is fun. And the vibe of, gas lights and smoke and mist and dark streets of London, that had some appeal. But I thought, maybe I should set this novel mostly in New York City. Because I'd done some other stuff that was set in Britain. And I thought, we had that same time period here. They
Sure.
don't have to cross the pond to experience the, like 1880s, let's say. Um, so that was all well and good. So now I need to really come to understand this place and time better. And so I started doing lots of research on Manhattan at this time. On the Lower East Side, I was most interested in that sort of turbulent area where lots of immigrants were arriving in the city. They would come in, and they would find themselves in the Lower East Side, in the Bowery, and in Five Points, and in those neighborhoods where there were the crowded tenements and a very rich mix of different types of people. So I'd settled on that as my locale, and I'm reading and I'm researching about the area. At the same time, I'm grappling with these questions about Medusa. When I chose Medusa, I wanted feminist revenge. I wanted women, I wanted a girl monster,
Yeah.
kicking butt, right? I wanted her to kind of go after the notorious villainous men who most gravely harm women. And so as I explored that idea, I realized that it presented me with a problem, which is that as much as I wanted the satisfaction on the page, the poetic justice of a sort of feminine monster avenger, I actually don't believe in a world where we go around killing everybody
Yeah.
who's done something wrong. I actually don't believe in that kind of justice. And I also felt that a Medusa who just instantly turned you to stone upon a glance, kind of that sort of truncated the story possibilities with a Medusa.
True.
Like I wanted a Medusa who could talk to you. I wanted a
Yeah.
Medusa who could sort of choose to utilize that effect or not. And I wanted a Medusa who could blend in and disappear when she wanted to. I took some liberties with the conventional novel, but can turn it on, and they can they to which they use their power, and in particular focused on the word petrify. Right? We say that Medusa petrifies her enemies, which
Yeah.
word means turning them to stone. But what I thought if petrify, what if we looked at the more psychological interpretation? Because to me, that was more interesting. I mean,
Yeah.
a book full of statues is less interesting
Yeah.
than a book full of terrified villains.
Yes.
so, so that's how I realized that if I wanted to keep that element of feminine revenge, I needed a villain who deserved it. I needed a situation where her wrath was justified, even though I generally kind of lean in the favor of mercy and, sort of rehabilitative justice rather than like
Sure.
off with their heads. So I'm reading this book about the Bowery and I'm thinking about this problem and I'm thinking I really need like the perfect villain. I need to think of like what that might be. And I figured it'd be something just fictional. And then I came upon this mention in this book about the Bowery that amongst other notable citizens who lived there at various points in time, They said one of them may have been Jack the Ripper. And I was like, hot diggity dog.
Yeah.
That's what I need. That's the villain I need. Like I like whooped and hollered, like, eureka. This is perfect. So then that, sent me on a direction of deep, deep research into Jack the Ripper, which was super creepy and scary. But the particular person who might have been Jack the Ripper that this author was referring to was an American who had fled London, who had been arrested on suspicion. There was no evidence that they could bring against him. He would, posted bail, fled, didn't, what's the term? I mean, I guess he skipped bail, fled to the United States, dogged by Scotland Yard investigators who suspected him pretty strongly. And he kind of disappeared into a boarding house in the Bowery, and the detectives, guarded the boarding house. And week or so later, he was able to slip through their grasp and disappear into somewhere, who
Yeah.
knows where. Um, and so, as the more I learned about him, he's kind of an eccentric character. I found a scholar who had researched this particular suspect, whose name is Francis Tumblety, very extensively. Turns out he's from Rochester, New York, which is about an hour away from where I live. So that
Okay.
felt kind of, another serendipity, right? This is my
Yeah.
local Jack the Ripper. Um, so I found this scholar who had done extensive research, and um, he'd given me so much material that I felt able to just really take this Francis Tumblety and put him right into the book. So
Yeah.
I apologize. That is not a succinct answer to
No.
the tell me about your book question. I'm gonna get
I
better at
love
like
it
getting.
though. I love it because I love hearing where these characters came from. Immediately when I heard Medusa and Jack the Ripper, when I saw this come through, I was like, I have to read this. I'm so intrigued. I very vaguely know of Medusa with the lady with snakes in her hair, right? And turning to stone. And that's all I really remembered from my school days doing Greek mythology. But I think that's the beauty of coming to novels like yours is we can really take a look. And even the your point about petrifying. I'm like, it's so true, right? There's that psychological piece of petrifying and taking a look at that. And so I love hearing about all of that, but also just saying, I heard Jack the Ripper and Medusa, and I thought, I have to read this and where it goes. So I absolutely loved it. And I am my number one choice of genre would be historical fiction, but you have woven so many elements into this bit of historical fiction that it becomes this super unique mashup of genres. And it was such a fun ride when I read it.
I'm so glad. Thank you. That means a lot to me. I know that it can perplex people, right? Historical fiction is supposed to kind of hew to the historical facts and be, a faithful attempt at realistically portraying how the past was. And so, what on earth am I doing bringing mythical monsters into, the Lower East Side in the Gilded Age? But why not, right?
Yeah.
Why not? And I think the reason that these sort of mythical or mystical or sort of spiritual elements appeal to me so much is because the issues that we face as a human species, right? As individuals, as as mortal animals, living our lives and slowly dying
Yeah.
in this complicated world of interactions with one another, the issues that produces and the psychological dramas that just living on this planet produces in each of us, they are bigger. They're bigger than words can convey. And so I think we need myth. We need these symbols. We need these metaphors. We need to be able to look at the world in terms of gods and monsters. We need to be able to grapple with the sublime and the diabolical. And so, whether it's a religion or a mythological system, it creates the stories and the language, the metaphors and symbols and archetypes that allow us to approach the great big deep truths that we all struggle with, right? I
Yeah.
mean, love, like let's just look at love, falling in love, like Tabitha and Mike in the book fall head over heels in love. And that's just bigger than you can describe by talking about coy glances and first kisses,
Yeah.
right? You do your best, you try. But but that's why in Lovely War I needed the goddess of love to tell us about it. Like I wanted to lavish and indulge in the gooey goodness of falling in love for the first time. And in this story where anger and where violence and survivors and overcoming victimhood and turning survivorhood and victimhood into a source of power and strength and a source of meaning to nurture and protect others. That just needed something bigger than a conversation about a committee being formed to, address um, X, Y, and Z. Not that that's not super important. That's how we
Yeah.
actually do change the world, right? Is people working together. And and the problem is the things that actually change the world are like people gathering together and forming committees and organizations and doing the slow, patient work of advocacy and change. It just doesn't lend itself to good fiction.
Yeah.
You know, like reading through the minutes of the last meeting are just not exciting to read about. So I think the way to dramatize these conduits of change often makes borrowing from myth a good idea. At least that's my
Yeah, but
that's
I
my
also
my
think it
take on it.
allows you to individually explore these topics, like you said, these conduits of change in a more in-depth way. And so then you can build within yourself how you're going to do that. And then that's where you said maybe you come to the collective to do that. But it allows you as the individual to really explore, to see where you really believe or where what are your thoughts on this. And so I totally think that there's a place for it though too, because we need to have that the strength as an individual to be able to go to the collective group to help, like you said, these conduits of change.
Mhm. And I think that's a really important point that you're making. Fiction favors the individual,
Yeah.
right? I mean, the default for a novel is one protagonist, start at the beginning of the story and follow them to the end. And sometimes we end up with two or three, but at most, a successful work of fiction can follow a small handful of individuals and really look at them as individuals.
Yeah.
So that subjectivity of fiction demands like an intimate experience with one or two or three human lives. But the world is so big and it only gets bigger, right? We don't live in once upon a time land anymore. We don't live in quaint little villages. We don't live on quaint little farms. We live in this globally interconnected, massive population, huge cities, huge nations. Um, and so we feel powerless. We feel helpless. We
Yeah.
feel that there's so little we can do.
Yeah.
And
As
we
an
do have
individual, right?
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And we feel like a number. And to be part of any meaningful change, we do have to kind of link elbows with others. We do have to work in collective groups. So a novel like If Looks Could Kill, where I have a little handful of main characters, and where that coming together as a group, as a sisterhood, as a coalition of emboldened and empowered women who want to make a difference, is my attempt to sort of bridge that gap. But it still remains a small microcosm, right? It took, armies of reformers. It took scores of, organizations and missions and charities and churches and groups trying to address the problems of that era of poverty and inequality in that era. And they made, incredible changes. Of course, their job's not done.
Yeah.
Um, but you're right. We are individuals. Fiction, speaks to us on an individual level about other individuals, but the world is for better and for worse a kind of corporate thing. Meaning, I don't mean corporation, but like we have to work together.
Yeah.
So that's how I try to bridge that divide.
Yeah. Here's where my maybe grandiose vision is I it's totally not taking this too much in the other direction, but I think books can bring us together though, in the
Mhm.
sense of they are one, to me, one of the ultimate conversational currencies. If you strike up a conversation with someone and maybe it's about a book, you have this instant more, a bit more of a connection to that person because you, okay, well, they're a reader too. Or you can join book clubs. I'm a military spouse actually, and so I have used books for the past 14 years of this life to make community in new places we move and live. And whether that's joining an existing book club or meeting enough people to say, hey, let's get together for a book club. And then we have this monthly meeting where we build community with one another. So I do think that books, while it is an individual activity of reading, they can bring us together over time.
Mhm. Thank you for doing what you're doing, and amen to everything you said. And I think it is so important to create community, first of all, at all, right?
Yeah.
Uh, but but particularly around books, around shared stories, around exploring our shared responses to, we read the same text and we have different feelings about it, different thoughts about it, and we can discuss that in a spirit of friendship and civility and kindness and curiosity. Usually not much in the way of argument, and every now and then maybe,
Yeah,
um,
depending on the book.
but right. But that's so healing and so important, both to promote that closeness and to promote literacy. I that's been the thing that sort of surprised me about owning the bookstores was the bookstore as we've formed these book clubs, we now have I think four of them. Is that right? I think we have four book clubs running. Um, the response from people coming and I really think there was an article, I think, in the New York Times about how book clubs are sort of the new post-COVID way of forming connection. Like we all
Yeah,
came out of COVID feeling kind of isolated, and book clubs are sort of a trendy new way right now to make friends. And
I'll take it.
um, I'll take it too.
Yeah.
But it's so important to come together through books. I don't think I realized that as a kid growing up in the boonies and just reading by myself. But I see now how these book clubs are changing lives and creating those safe spaces that people long for. And I want to give a plug too. I know you mentioned having children. We have a middle grade book club at the bookstore,
I
and
love it.
I am so in love with what's happening with those kids and how they're forming their critical skills, finding their tastes, and making friends. And really, there's some of them are kind of shy reader introverts at first, but to see them coming out of their shells. And I just want to make a pitch to the entire world. Start a middle grade book club in your town. Start a middle grade book club with your kids and their
I
friends.
love it.
Start a middle grade book club with your library or your bookstore or your school or your church. Um, we face a lot of concern in the children's literature world that middle graders are just not reading like they used to. They're on digital devices all
Mhm.
the time. I don't believe that kids aren't reading, but I do believe that we face a real issue. If we don't keep kids in those, you know, 8 to 13 age, if in that window, if we don't keep them
Yeah.
reading, we're not going to have adult readers. And it's so vital, right, that we have a society of people who read, who think, who imagine, who dream, who are verbally fluent, who are vocally persuasive. So that's my pitch to the world. If you've been thinking about it, start that middle grade book club. You'll be amazed at how it creates readers out of kids that maybe didn't even think they wanted to read. So
Yeah.
it has a rippling influence.
Yeah, I interviewed actually yesterday Gordon Corman, and he was talking about why he loves to write middle grade because it's the first time kids are really starting to make choices about the books they want to read. And so I've just been, that's thought has been marinating in my head because it's so true. I have an almost 10-year-old, as I was telling you, so he's solidly in this camp. And it's true. I will pick up a book like, oh, I read Number of the Stars as a kid. You should read this too. And he'll be like, I don't know that I want to, because he's starting to have choices of what he would like to read. And I love that. I want to embrace that, but it has stuck with me since he said it yesterday that I've just been thinking of that. And this is the chance to, even he's like, even if you have a reluctant reader, keep experimenting with different books to find the one they like to open that door for them to the reading world.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think a club turns it into a reward, the right kind of reward,
Yeah.
right? We struggle like how to incentivize reading. Do we pay kids? Do we give them prizes? Like
Yeah.
it's complicated. But and a lot of kids that are now, avid members of our book club were very resistant to it at first and had to be kind of coaxed to come, and now they love it. So keep persevering, keep trying, start that book club, you know, getting a handful of kids to read and love it and form friendships is just going to yield such incredible
Yeah.
dividends. So,
I love that.
sermon
Thank
over.
you. Well, let's switch gears a little bit and let's talk about who you are as a reader. I know you've mentioned that you do a ton of research, and I guess maybe one question before we go there is how long, give us perspective on how long this research process takes and this, like you said, kind of revising the story and you started and it's like, keep going with Medusa. Like what is the timeline of that process?
You know, it's always so hard to figure out like how long does this take or how much time do I spend. Writing and researching and reading are things that sort of get stuffed in to the cracks and crevices of my
Sure.
life, especially for so many years raising kids. People are like, when do you do this? I was like, I honestly don't know. It's just like each day I try to figure it out. Um,
5 minutes
but
here, 5 minutes there.
exactly,
Yeah.
yes, you know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
So I love the research. I love the learning. I love how this occupation allows me to say, I'm curious about space. I want to spend some time thinking about space for a while. I'm going to read all about that. Or I'm curious about the Middle Ages. I'm going to spend some time thinking about that. So it gives me like absolute permission and professional obligation
Yeah.
to follow my curiosity wherever it leads and to continue to educate myself and to continue to surprise myself. And that's what I love so much. Like the world is just so full of surprises, and our past is filled with fascinating characters who are exceptions, dramatic exceptions to a lot of the stereotypes that we've acquired about the past. And it was this way, and women
Yeah.
were this way, and men were this way, and there are all these interesting people that prove that the past was a lot more textured than we thought. So when and how do I do it and how long does it take? You know, I think it's usually about a year and a half to 2.5 years to do a
Okay.
really researched historical novel. But it's not like 40 hours a week,
Sure.
50 weeks a year. I don't know how to explain it. Like there'll be times when I'm just absolutely in a cave researching and reading.
Yeah.
But I have developed some processes that help. Um, I if I determine that a book is a research title for me, I will buy it the audiobook, I will buy the physical book, and I will buy the digital book. And I buy every book that I read as a researcher. And I know people say, well, that's a lot of money. I say, well, this is my job, right? Like the couple $100s I spend on research materials is
Yeah.
nothing compared to, selling the book. So I don't ever question that. And I think that's helped me to speed up the research. I think that doing it the way we did it in high school, where you have to copy everything longhand from a library book that
Yeah.
you can't mark up, is yeah, that takes a lot longer. So I need to be able to really chew through my books and highlight and mark and
Yeah.
annotate them. So I'll begin by listening to the audiobook while I'm folding laundry and driving the kids around or whatever. I'll listen to the audiobook just to get an initial familiarity with the material. Then I'll buy the book and read through it, start marking it up. I'll listen to it again to refamiliarize myself with the material. And then I will get the digital copy to have a searchable version of the
Yeah.
book. So some of these tricks that I've learned have made it a lot faster for me to digest the knowledge that a book has to offer me. But to write a book like If Looks Could Kill, I'm probably doing that to about 20 or 30 books of
Wow.
research.
Yeah.
Now, that's not to say that I have to read every book cover to cover. Some
Sure.
of them only a slice of the book is what I need. But there'll usually be maybe 5 or 6 books that are like absolutely crucial
Really.
that I need to just devour. So I love it. I absolutely love
Yeah.
it. It's so stimulating.
Yeah, and I love your point about how it's allowed you to further explore these curiosities, and it was full permission to be able to do that. And I think that is the other thing that I think many of us struggle with is allowing ourselves to truly leisure or to truly dig into something that is whether it's reading or hobbies or knitting or whatever, because it's not something that's productive or making us money. Like we have a hard time letting go and just being in that space. I think we're just so driven by a goal or how productive we can be as a society sometimes, which I think is to our detriment.
Absolutely. I agree with you completely, and yet I know that I'm exactly who you're talking about
Well,
because,
you and me both. So,
and I mean, by making what I love my work, I can bring the urgency of work to doing what I love. Like this is what I have to do. It's my work, and it
yeah.
really and truly is. But yeah, I'm a classic case of. Um, I think it feels self-praising to call yourself a workaholic. I don't like that. But like I don't know how to compartmentalize well. I don't know how to vacation well. I'm really good at going on research vacations and like going to museums with a list of things I need to find out. Like that is like super fun for me. But like just going to a place where, you're just supposed to kind of
Like the
be a
beach.
flaneur and how to do it. I'm terrible. I'm such a like a Yankee farm girl at heart. It's pretty bad.
Yeah. Yes. Well, if you, let's go with this. If you truly got to leisure or head to the beach or wherever it might be, what genres do you enjoy reading? What would you be bringing?
Well, when I need to just read for fun, when I need to not be working at my reading, but just sort of basking in some comfort and some entertainment, I love to read humor. I love P.G. Wodehouse. I love
Yes.
Terry Pratchett. Um, I I kind of cut my teeth on like Dave Barry and Irma Bombeck growing up. I loved Calvin and Hobbes. And
Yes.
I feel like we really give humor short shrift. Like you never see Oscars won by comedy films, even though comic films, I mean, comedy performance and direction and writing is some of the smartest and most challenging
Yeah.
work. Like it's frankly easier to be depressing than it is to be clever
Yeah,
and
there has
witty
to
and
be a
sparkly.
delivery with the comedy, right? And this pacing of it and how to put that out there.
Yeah, it's really hard to do. It's a
Yeah.
lot easier to be morbid or whatever than to be sparkly with wit. So I love humor. I consume that a lot. I love mysteries. I love fantasy. About every other Christmas I'll reread the Lord of the Rings trilogy. This
Yes.
past Christmas I read the Narnia books. Um, I love to revisit childhood favorites. I grew up on Agatha Christie. I just read her all the time. So, I've kind of that's kind of where I go.
Yeah.
Obviously I love Jane Austen. I love, the Victorian women novelists. They're always a source of delight. Um, so that's kind of where I just when I just need to veg, that's where I go.
Yeah.
I recently One great thing about owning a bookstore is it's got me reading more. It's got me reading more fiction for grown-ups because between raising kids and reading with them, writing books for kids, getting an MFA in writing for children,
Yeah.
I have been so immersed in reading books for young people or writing books for young people or researching stuff to write books for young people that I wasn't reading a lot of adult fiction really at all.
Sure.
Um, but now with these book clubs and like I need to be able to give people recommendations when they come in the store. I feel often like I have egg on my face, like I haven't read stuff that I
Yeah.
should have. Um, so that's been really cool too, and it's been fun to find find new voices that I enjoy a lot. So yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and so it sounds like you read very widely when you get the chance. But how, in your busyness, do you find time for reading? Because I imagine as a writer and researching and owning a bookstore, I mean, it just, your time is very limited. So how do you find time to do that?
I do I do avail myself of audiobooks a lot, and that helps me so that I can listen while I'm,
Yeah.
getting exercise. I can listen while I'm cleaning the house. I can listen while I'm doing mindless things. Um, Car time is great listening time. But I also, read with my eyeballs a lot. And um and it has helped me, kind of back to your point about work versus leisure, to make it work, to make it a requirement has helped me to prioritize it into the schedule. And I know that might sound like it, robs it of its joy, but it really doesn't. But like, for example, I have to read the book club picks each month.
Yeah.
There have been some months where I didn't quite finish and then I feel very embarrassed. So I have to read my book club books because I'm leading the discussion. So I have to
Yeah.
be prepared for that. Um, and I have to read books that are relevant to my work in progress. I have to. It has
Yeah.
to be done. And so, as I plan out my week, I I put reading time blocks into the schedule, um, like I would, writing time or do your taxes time or whatever else
Yeah.
is going on,
Yeah.
redo your website.
It's a scheduling block. It's going to make it
Yes,
there.
yes, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean because obviously I read quite a bit for episodes as well.
Uh-huh.
And of course, it's books that in my mind, I'm going to say the word obligated, but that, like you said, makes it sound like I'm stealing the joy of it. But it is just as enjoyable to read the novel that I have for an upcoming episode than it is to pick up one that maybe I just read on a whim because I was in a mood for a rom-com. So it
Well,
doesn't take away the joy because it's still the act of reading and you're still immersing yourself in a story. So it's still just delightful,
absolutely,
regardless
absolutely.
what the end goal might be for it.
I think even the busiest among us don't realize all the little pockets of time that we have and the ways in which our phones and things like that consume time. And I'm plenty guilty, but I one trick is keep a book in the bathroom. You'll be amazed
Yeah.
how you can get through a book that's in the bathroom. And I hope that's not gross, but I
Yeah.
feel like, just find those little places where you have downtime. Obviously have a book in your bag with you at all times so that when you are at the, dentist's office or something, you can be reading instead of on your phone. Have a book by your bed, of course. So I think we all have more than we think, and especially if we
Yes.
can put the phone away,
Yeah,
get more
James
reading done.
Clear talks about that in Atomic Habits and basically having it be as convenient as possible for whatever habit it is you're trying to perform or do or be better at, that having it in a place of convenience. And like you said, that might be having a few books in different places around your house where you know you might end up. So, well, I ask all the guests to come on and talk about three of this can be your favorite books, or like you mentioned, maybe books you're researching, but in the form of a book flight. Can you tell us three books that you have been loving lately?
The three books that I have been reading this last week and a
Okay.
half, are um, The Raging Erie by Mark Farrar. I'll just spoil this right up front. I'm working on a historical fictional novel set during the early days of the Erie Canal, which is
Okay.
right here in my backyard and here where I grew up.
Yes.
Um, so I'm reading The Raging Erie by Mark Farrar. Just finished that. I'm reading Heaven's Ditch by Jack Kelly, God, Gold, and Murder on the Erie Canal. This is
Ooh.
fabulous,
I would
fabulous
say
read.
that sounds
Really,
very intriguing.
yeah, it's I tell people it reads like a novel. It's historical narrative nonfiction, but it has the pacing and the drama of a novel and really you really feel you get to know these characters. And
Yeah.
then I'm reading New York's Burned Over District, a documentary history by Spencer McBride and Jennifer Hall Dorsey. And this is original documents from this period of history when the Second Great Awakening was happening and all these religious revivals. And it's just absolutely rich material for helping me understand the world. This place and time that I want to understand better. The challenge that you often face in reading historical material is a lot of it is written about the great men of the age, the political leaders, the business leaders,
Yeah.
the financiers, and the soldiers and whatnot. And you need to know that. Like that's important history. But to write the kind of novels I write, I need social history. I need to know how ordinary people thought. I need to know how they cooked, how, what they actually believed, not just what they said they believed, but like what they really did each day. So these social histories are immensely valuable and just utterly fascinating to me. So that's what I'm reading this week.
Yes, I imagine that's going to add a special touch to it too, because you're living, like you said, it's right in your backyard. So it's going to add just that much more to your story.
I hope so. It's different than anything I've done before because usually when I write a historical novel, it's some other place that I
Sure.
go to like eyes wide open as a, oh, what would it be like to be here? Um, and I go to sort of find the past. And now I'm writing about the place where I go to the grocery store, and the
Yeah,
place where I go to the ATM machine and pharmacy. And so to separate the familiarity from where I live and try to look at it as though it's unfamiliar will be an
sure.
interesting challenge.
Yeah. Oh, I'll be so interested to hear about that and how that goes for you. Well, how I love
Okay.
to end our show is with our bonus pairings, and they're a speed round of questions you can answer really quick. Are you a rereader?
Absolutely.
Okay. What is one book you've read that has changed your life?
The Hero with a Thousand Faces by Joseph Campbell has changed my life.
Oh, I haven't even heard of that one. I'm going to have to check that one out. Where is your favorite place to read?
Probably bed.
Closing out the day with a book is the best. And
Mm.
lastly, you've already kind of told us what you're reading lately, so it might be similar, but what are you reading next?
Mm. Well, I am reading a book called Service Model by Adrian Tchaikovsky, which I am loving. So I'm still early enough in it that I think I can call it next.
Okay.
It is such a smart, such a beautifully written, clever, intelligent, um, futuristic science fiction novel with the protagonist being a robot. And I know that
Oh,
might sound kind of oh, like I've seen that before, we've seen Wally or whatever, but it's so, so smart and so spot on as a commentary on our world. And it's so relevant to these,
yeah.
AI times in which we live. So very strongly recommend Service Model by Adrian
Okay.
Tchaikovsky.
Oh, they'll definitely be adding that one to the list. So thank you so much for coming on the show with me today. I know your time is precious, and I appreciate all you've given me.
Oh, thank you so much. And I appreciate your time spent with If Looks Could Kill. And thank you for sharing it with your audience today.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for listening to this episode today with Julie Berry, including her book flight of books that she's using to research the early days of the Erie Canal. If you enjoyed the show, please head over to Apple Podcasts and leave a review. Your review not only helps the show, but it also helps the podcast to reach others. Make sure you are subscribed on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to make sure you will not miss an episode. That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. As Emma Thompson said, I think books are like people in the sense that they'll turn up in your life when you most need them. Cheers to you, dear readers. Until next time.